Now, I'll start with you, Tony, because you recently did this. If you're hiring a president of basketball operations or whatever the title might be, what are the qualities you're most interested in?
Well, for me at least, a president of basketball operations, a head of basketball operations, a general manager is all the same. You own basketball personnel. Your job is to make sure we have the best players on the court, the best players that we can develop for the future. So your job is all about players, and a coach's job is to win every day as much as possible. So I do differentiate between the two, of course. I've learned that over time, a relatively short period of time. But I am a big believer that a general manager, head of basketball operations, president of basketball operations is all about understanding and not just what makes a good basketball player, of course, now, but I would also say, which I did not appreciate when I came into the league, how tough it is when you're drafting kids that are not 21, 22, but actually 18 or 19, and expecting them to be great ball players at 22, 23, 24. So you're really trying to figure out how a kid is going to develop 5 years forward. Hard to do. Hard to do.
Dan, what is the job description of an NBA owner?
Yes, you know, it's funny you asked that question because I was just talking to Joe right before we went on the air here. In every other business in the world almost, the number one complaint of the person who either owns a business or is in charge usually is that they're too much of a micromanager. They're too much involved. They need to let things go. In the NBA or sports, I guess in general, if you're an owner, the second you cross the line into the arena, you're meddling, and you need to stay away. You know, so I guess it depends on who you ask, right? And but I would say I agree with the owners here. I think that number one, setting a culture, you know, which in most businesses today is probably, you know, the number one thing. I think years ago people didn't talk too much about it, but culture's everything. And I think, you know, determining obviously the financing and backing the business with what the capital it needs, like any other business. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on if you like it or not, there'll be certain decisions hard decisions that have to be made, and hopefully you can do the work that you make more right ones than wrong ones.
Steve, it's interesting. You don't play, you don't coach, you don't scout, you don't individually sell sponsorships, any of that stuff. So what is your job?
Pick up on where Dan left off. There are big decisions that are only the owners to make. Big financial decisions, whether it has to do with roster or whether it has to do with building a new arena or remodeling or whatever you're going to do. Those decisions, they're non-delegable. They're non-delegable. You go to your team, your leaders, but they know it's your money, so they're going to need to ask you. The owner's the only guy you can count on being around in 5 years. If you just look at the longevity of people enrolled, the owner's the person who's going to be around. So who has to make the commitment to the organization about what it wants to be and why you should be there? It's on the owner, because the players can turn over, the coach could turn over, the front office staff can turn over. Now, it's nice if you can do it, you have 15, 20 years in a row. That's the way it's nice to run any business. It's just probably not as realistic, particularly with the players. It's not as realistic.
When we bought our team 7 years ago, the number one thing was to set a vision and a culture, as you point out. But the most important thing, and it's like any other business really, is to hire the right people to do the job. We're not going to do none of us do all the work. We don't do the job, but we have to hire the right people. That is our most important thing. Now, this issue of meddling, which has come up a couple times now.
By the way, you don't hear, is there any other business, that word, maybe the Joker on Batman, he meddled, you don't really, no, when have you ever heard that
The
word?
villains on Scooby-Doo were
yeah,
often
maybe he's meddling.
kids.
It's a word that only goes with ownership of sports.
Dan and I were talking about it. The truth is, the best owners, I think we believe, are those that are very involved. They do not micromanage.
Right.
That's the key, right? We don't micromanage, but we're very, very involved and know all the details.
He's got 30 folks telling him what to do or what not to do, often.
30 opinionated.
30 geniuses.
Highly opinionated folks. And from my experience, at least, what I've seen about Adam, which makes him, I think, that rare executive, and certainly in sports, but maybe in any business, he sees the macro. He's looking and trying to get input on where the NBA is going to be in 10 years, and are we positioned to get there? So he's very focused on, to me, the macro, the long term. And yet, when I call him, which I do on in Atlanta, we need to redo and are redoing our arena. We need to build a practice facility. We need to refurbish or help to transform the entire downtown of Atlanta to make it a cool place for people to come 2 hours before a game stay 2 hours after. And I'm asking him, is this normal? Is this consistent with what 29 other franchises are doing to run a better franchise? And I must tell you, he's giving me that best practices of, you've got to do this. Look what the guys are doing in Golden State, what the folks are doing in Memphis, what people are doing to develop their areas, their downtowns, if you will, to be a force of good in the community. That's important. And Adam has a sense of that, because from his seat, he sees a lot of good and not so good, and he's able to pass on the good, and that's an important function.
He knows how to be tactical and strategic.
You bet.
And that's very difficult to do.
You bet.
Just so we're on the record, nobody wants to be commissioner, correct?
No. Too hard.
You sure? Okay, all right, good.
Trust me.
Wouldn't be as good as the current guy.
Oh, your fans, your hardcore fans feel like they have something of an ownership in those teams as well. To what extent do you listen, Jeannie, to their suggestions, their wants, their desires, or do you have to have tunnel vision and go about it the way you want to go about it?
I think any person in my position would be foolish not to listen. And you know, there's a difference between the fans and then there's your customers. And your customer, I think of the season seat holders as our customers, because they're writing checks for the tickets every year. And to get their feedback and hear what they have to say, whether it's positive or negative, you got to take that in. You can't be afraid of it.
I mean, I'd echo what Jeannie said, particularly on the actual ticket buyer, etc. There's an experience that's all important. In terms of like, what should you do with the team fans? I think it's great to hear. I mean, the truth is they all contradict each other anyway, and that's okay. But to listen to sentiment doesn't mean you have to do what sentiment says, but to understand that, to know where you agree, to learn with what you can, to know how you need to tell your story if you decide to take a somewhat different direction. I think it's fantastic. It's one of the things that I think is cool about this business that I never saw before, is your fans actually pretty much can know almost anything that your general manager can do. Almost anything.
Yeah.
There are fans who spend as much time almost, frankly, as full-time employees of, of the Clippers studying this stuff. And I say that is fantastic. Let's hear what they have to say.
All right, Joe, champions first. How do you view your role as an NBA owner? In other words, what is your job?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I view my job from my standpoint is to win again. I mean, that's what we work on. I haven't even had a chance to enjoy it, to be honest. People think, oh, we're just partying and all that. But the truth is, we went right from that to the parade, the draft, free agency. You know, I'm always focused on the job, and the job is to continue to get our organization better.
Tony, what do you think? What is your job?
Well, my job is a little different than Joe's job, I think, because it is, in fact, to win, but maybe not with as an immediate an approach. It's been 49 years in Atlanta since they've won a championship.
Right.
All right. And we haven't had, I should say, in Atlanta, we haven't won a championship. St. Louis.
Right.
The St. Louis Hawks won a championship. So we've had 49 years in Atlanta without a championship. So I have a job, which is to create a championship culture. It's not done overnight. It's not done in a period of weeks or months, but with the right focus, it will be done. And that's what I'm there for. It's going to be a focus that I did not appreciate the amount of time and effort that is obviously required. And you get to see that when you see great franchises that have built championship cultures. We have a little bit of work to do, but we have a path that we know what to do, and we plan to go after it.
Well, Jeannie, you obviously have been a part of championship culture with the LA Lakers. How do you, as an owner, affect change toward that goal?
What I think the role of an owner is to put together all the pieces. We're the producers. We put everything together so that the team can be the best that they can be, that they can meet their expectations of who they are as players, and maybe even exceed them, and come together as a team. And winning a championship is really difficult. It's really hard, and every year that's your goal. But it's, you know, great competitive ownership groups all doing the right things. We just try to, you know, put together the pieces and hope for the best.
Dan, what is the job description of an NBA owner?
Yes, you know, it's funny you asked that question, because I was just talking to Joe right before we went on the air here. In every other business in the world almost, the number one complaint of the person who either owns a business or is in charge usually is that they're too much of a micromanager. They're too much involved. They need to let things go. In the NBA or sports, I guess in general, if you're an owner, the second you cross the line into the arena, you're meddling, and you need to stay away. So I guess it depends on who you ask, right? And but I would say I agree with the owners here. I think that number one, setting a culture, which in most businesses today is probably the number one thing. I think years ago people didn't talk too much about it, but culture's everything. And I think determining obviously the financing and backing the business with what the capital it needs, like any other business. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on if you like it or not, there'll be certain hard decisions that have to be made, and hopefully you can do the work that you make more right ones than wrong ones.
We had to look at a general manager, and I went and interviewed, got all these recommendations from around the league, and interviewed all these guys, and I didn't like any of them. And I think I wound up hiring a guy that really hadn't done it before, that was a player agent, and who had this one great skill set for sure. He had played, and he knew basketball, but he was a great, negotiator. But really, what turned out to be the most important thing is how well does he get along with me? Because I'm involved. It's, I'm the managing guy for the team, the owner, and you have to be able to work well with your general manager. You have to get along. You have to see eye to eye. You don't have to agree on everything, but you have to be able to communicate. And so at the end of the day, I look back at Bob Myers, who I think is the best general manager in the game.
Because he gets along with you.
That's all with me. But he
Apparently
won the
a rare
award
thing
through the
or
last 2
something.
years. But here's the truth is, we get along great.
I don't allocate an enormous amount of importance to how my GM gets along with me. I allocate so much more. I consider the vision. Do I follow what he says? Do I get what he's trying to do? And do I understand where he's trying to take our franchise? And for me, that has so much more value because, frankly, the concern I would have for people that, where you put too much of a role in how we get along, how you communicate, I get. Right. But how we get along, to me, I want a GM that really has a vision. Now, granted, our franchises might be slightly in different places, but a vision is so important to me.
When I first got there, I was like, I can't just go out and hire new people because I don't know what to hire for, right? So I'll keep the people that are there. And I learned very quickly and very expensively that the number one job of a general manager is not to win championships, it's to keep their job, right? And they'll do it and they'll spend your money in any way they can in order to keep that job. And it cost me a boatload of money early on. And then I started, from my perspective, again, we're all different, that there were certain skill sets I started valuing more and more and more. Right, I remember walking to a scouts meeting and our war room, right? And we had all of our players all lined up for the draft. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you think about all these. And I'd read some scouting reports. He goes, I like him a little bit. I'm like, look, anybody who says I like him a little bit, you're immediately fired, right? If you can't take a position. And so I started recognizing that, to me, the number one, the most difficult skill set in basketball is talent evaluation. And then from there, you start working out, because if you can't evaluate players well, it doesn't matter what you negotiate, doesn't matter how good your coach is, doesn't matter how good your general manager is, you're going to suck.
For me, it's about being of like mind, and like Joe was saying, that there's communication, collaboration, and recently I made a big change and brought in Magic Johnson as the president of our basketball, and it's about having a vision and then making every decision that reflects that vision. And what was missing with our team for a few years was we were changing coaches every 18 months, emphasizing defense, then emphasizing offense. And like the roster can't change that quickly. So it just seemed like we were spinning our wheels. So what I want to see is just a process where every decision complements the one before, and that we're going in a direction that our fans can understand. Right. And be patient, because you can't win every year. But if you know that they're not wasting money, signing bad contracts that get you stuck. And I think I have that with Magic Johnson.
Mark, for you, the stress level in real life business and basketball?
Losing kills me. Kills me. Kills me. It took me 15 years before I could sleep after a game we lost. Regular season, playoffs, worst.
Especially home games, right?
No, any games,
Every-
right? Any games, right? Destroyed me, right? And then, as my kids got a little older, I had to force myself to change so they didn't feel it, right? But, if a game ended at 10 and I would drive around for 2 hours, I would, do whatever till 3 in the morning. I mean, it just tore me apart thinking, what could I have done differently? And that's why, you see all the different stress levels. Like watching Steve, I see a little bit of me because we're watching any of us really, because when the game is on the line, right? When the game starts, best of hopes, but we know we really can't do anything more, right? It's completely out of our control. But for us, more than anybody in the world, for each of our teams, when that ball is in the air, there is more stress penned up in you than you could ever possibly imagine. And only in our minds is everything dependent on whether that ball goes through the hoop or bounces off the rim. The most relieved I've ever been, the year we won, the most relieved point, the happiest point / relief point was when there was 30 seconds to go in the game and we were up 11. And that was the first time I let myself believe that we could win. And the fact you could just see me just screaming, and there's a picture of me just screaming because it wasn't so much that I was happy, it was that I was relieved, right? Because every instance of every game is pure stress. And these guys will tell you, losing is far more painful than winning is joyful.
Last year with us, with Cleveland, and there was so much joy in that city. I mean, maybe sports probably should not matter as much as it does. I mean, you sort of hate to say that. Maybe that's blasphemy here, but it probably shouldn't. But it does, and there's not. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it does. And when you saw 1.3 million people, it was like, talk about a burden. And you looked into their eyes in this parade. I'll never forget that the rest of my life. I mean, I could almost get just goosebumps thinking about it, not because of us, but because of the burden that was lifted. That's what sports can do for a city, man, and can do for a town. So it takes on, something much bigger than the court, representing a city.
Steve, you relating to this joy versus despair?
Yeah, I
ratio?
don't like losing very much. I sleep well. Not because I don't care. I feel like I better sleep well because otherwise I can't get back to obsessing the next day. I don't have my energy to try to be as good a fan as I can be the next day. And I'm blessed with the ability to sleep, and I like that. But, for me, it's about, thinking things. I wake up first thing in the morning. I don't know what I thought I was sleeping well, but there'll be an idea in my head. And boom, I'm texting something out just that quick. So I like the winning. I hate the losing. I really hate the losing. The best we've done since I've been an owner is get to the second round of the playoffs. I can still see every part of the trajectory of the shot that Chris Paul had to make in our game against San Antonio. And I haven't been to the finals like, basically Tony and I guess the two haven't, but, I can't imagine what that's like. But I can imagine getting pretty juiced up.
You think?
On the positive.
I think we can imagine you that way too.
You know what? Depressed
You might not make it through. I don't know.
Worried about it. We don't use the rebuild term, but getting younger and still being incredibly competitive, playing hard, but being young and fun, but getting younger clearly, is a method by which we could take, hopefully, a small step back in an effort to take a huge step forward.
How do you view that decision? If you're not a championship contender, you're not the worst team in the league.
I always judge it by how many sprained ankles or broken legs we are away, because things change, right? Kawhi Leonard doesn't get hurt, could be a different ball game, right? We had early on in my career, Dirk. We're in Game 6 against who's left? We're in Game 6.
I'll stick up for Kawhi and the Spurs, even if Joe wants to roll his eyes. It could have been a different deal.
But you just never know, right?
don't know.
You just don't know. Right, and so, early on with me, we've Game 6 against San Antonio, and Dirk gets hurt, right? We're whooping them, right? And we end up losing in the conference finals to them because Dirk doesn't play the last 2 games. And so it's so tenuous that up until recently, I was like, look, you play it out. You see what happens. The year we won, we were 29-4. Then Caron Butler dislocates his kneecap, done for the season. Roddy Boubois, who was our backup point guard, breaks his foot and his hand, done for the season. But we kept on playing it out, and we ended up getting Peja, who could barely walk, and he has big series for us against the Lakers, and everything turned from there. And so just, you know, I've always taken the approach that if you put yourself with a chance to get lucky, put yourself with a chance to succeed, anything's possible because somebody gets hurt, right? But at some point you have to be realistic, you know, and you have to start looking to the future. And I think that's where we are now. And trust me, going into last season, and we won 33 games last season, I thought we had a chance to be a 50-win team and maybe make an in-season trade and compete. But what changed was Dirk gets hurt. You know, 4 of our top 6 guys get hurt, and we start off 3-16. And then from there, you know, the script was written, and we had to do what we had to do.